Hi all and welcome to another an evening with Thomas, and our guest today is Karl Appel. Some of you will know that he's been on the show before in his capacity as a representative for National Liberty Alliance and John Darash's group. Well, today I've no doubt he'll be mentioning some aspects of that, but today is all about Karl Appel, not National Liberty Alliance. And he has an interesting story to tell, and this show is about people being able and feeling comfortable to come forward and speak their truth. It's not mine, it's yours. And you know, we've had some very interesting guests on, people who have kept quiet over a long period of time throughout their lives because they're frightened to speak, because of the negative reactions we get, and still get to that point. But for those of you listening to Chloe's podcast before, I mentioned near the end, it's time to stand in your light and ignore what other people think or say. That's the key to all of us. And I'm glad that Karl has shown the courage to step forward and relay some of his story. So I'm going to introduce him now. Hi, Karl.
Hey, Thomas. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So this will, as you said, will be as we go through your story, will come as a surprise to some, including your own family. But I think we all go through those aspects in life. And you, from what and the talks I had with you, you woke up from a very early age, and we'll obviously be going to go through that story of you waking up and not understanding what's going on, and all the doubts and the questions that everyone has, including yourself. But we'd like to know a bit about Karl and your life before we go into the bigger stuff. So where did you grow up in? What school? How did school go? And what you do is to make a living or work or anything you were. And also mention perhaps some of your achievements, because I know you've achieved master degrees in certain things as well.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. So for me, I grew up in New York City for roughly the first 5 years of my life, and I grew up in a middle-class family at that time. I still have an autistic brother, and for me, school at that point, I did have trouble. I did have some sort of reading and speech issues, but after about 5, my parents moved out to Long Island a little bit further out, and at that particular time, my family did a little bit better financially. As time also went on, I did a little bit better in terms of education, and school wasn't as tough for me as I went into my middle school and high school years. I originally was in the public school system for up till 8th grade, and then I actually chose on my own to go to a Catholic high school. I went to a Catholic high school called St. John the Baptist out on Long Island there. And for me, I mostly did okay. I really didn't try that much, and a lot of people in my family also were very big in education. It was kind of that program, like, you know, go get the best education you can. And, you know, it's not necessarily a bad program, but, like, that was what my family was really focused on. And for me, I didn't really try that much, despite doing okay. And as I went into college, I decided to take more of a technology approach. I was really interested in computer science and programming, And I did really well with that, and I really liked the profession, the field there. And eventually, after that, I was interested in working with different startups. I then pursued a degree in technology commercialization, which is where I got my master's in. And from that point on, I've been working with a startup or two, and I've been doing mostly business for myself. So that's really the preamble to that.
Yeah. So school was difficult. I think this most of us that are involved in the alternative media have gone through a difficult time at school. I think it's because I would say there's a high number in THI who have different abilities or switched on abilities, shall we say, because we've all got them, but some haven't learned to turn them on yet. And in a knowing that things went right here, and in a knowing that what you were being taught was not correct, is that something that you felt when you were young, but couldn't put it into words or articulate it until a later date?
Yes, in many ways I knew something was off, but in other ways I was also programmed or counter-programmed to accept certain things and not really bring that up. And for me, I was also in a lot of honors classes and doing all these extracurricular activities, but I never really was engaged with it in high school or at a younger age. Like a lot of people who are, I guess, very passionate, they're really engaged and they love to soak that up. But for me, I never was like, oh, I love to study for this spelling exam or this math exam. I never really was like that way until I went on and went to college and really decided, hey, I really like doing software stuff.
Yeah.
So, yes, for me it was difficult in that sense, but I was kind of lucky because I knew enough to get away with not really applying too much effort. Unlike a lot of people who really need to apply effort to do well in school at a young age. So, in that sense, I was fortunate, but I never really was passionate about it until that point in time.
Yeah, there's probably 3 or 4 categories of people in school. You've got the people who just have not developed sufficiently at a younger age to be able to grasp it. And this is part of what we mentioned in the Leathershop show. If you don't engage the child in the first 5 years, then basically they're never going to develop. And that's always sad. And then you've got a middle range where you've got people who struggle and people who have an ability but can't be bothered. And it doesn't resonate with them. And then you got the plodder types. The eldest son, he was a plodder type. He wasn't particularly bright or clever or intelligent, but he just drifted through school and he did okay. Whereas the younger son was more like me. Things came to him easier, so he feels like he shouldn't bother as much. He, like me, ended up with very little so-called pieces of paper that tell you that you're more intelligent or not, which is not a true example.
Right.
It's not a true example of life, and this is the problem with school. With these tests, people get nervous when they do a test. People doing a driving test, people get nervous. It brings out an instinct reaction, and then and they could do so well in school, and then suddenly they come to test day and and have a memory blank. You know, you never know what's going on in that child's head. You know, maybe like me, my parents were getting divorced right through my exam time, and so there's so many different aspects of it, and that's why I don't feel those pieces of paper carry real value of whether that child is developed or it isn't. And of course, since I left school, it's got a lot worse, you know. And then you have the people who have the ability and then just recognise that's more smaller in number. Something's what we're being taught here doesn't resonate, and you struggle to articulate it, and because there's no one else around who feels that way, because we're isolated, then you have a choice. You either go silent or join the herd, and too many joined the herd, and a large volume went silent. And this is why shows like these are good, to then get people telling their story, because we've all listened to everybody else's and how life should be, and how we should just ignore all kinds of atrocities going on around the world, and it seems to be okay for the masses, but it's not right for us, and we've kept quiet for too long. So I'm pleased that you've shown the courage to step forward.
So for me, I think I always knew something was wrong, but I always just was that kid who fell in line with the crowd and did what the adults wanted me to, because it was just simpler that way, and I could just keep my thoughts to myself and not worry about being criticized.
Yeah.
And that was a very difficult thing for me, because with friends, even that I have today, I couldn't name you one who I could talk to about what I'm talking to all of you today about. Not a single one that I feel comfortable with. And that's a problem that we have in general, and I'm talking about all of us, where our stories, where they may not necessarily be complete, or they may not make sense right away, they are our stories, and we just need to have the courage to come out and tell them as we have experienced them.
Yes, this is about your story, not his story.
Yes, absolutely.
As we found out, those of us have been in the alternative media for a long time, most of his story is incorrect, you know. But you mentioned earlier about you chose to go with the herd because you were worried about being criticised or whatever. How did that make you feel? Did you go introverted, and did it make you very insular? And has that impacted your life over the long period of time?
It has, in a way, because I was very introverted, and I would then not really talk a lot. And when I didn't talk a lot, I had a lot of tension built up, and I would try to outlet those frustrations with video games or some other mechanism to get that out there.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, about, going on YouTube, friends as well. And because of that, I've had some kind of built up tension, as I said, and it's kind of boiled over, and
it does. It's frustrating in so many ways. Of course, it's difficult when you're younger, because I had an inner knowing and an inner knowledge that I didn't know where it came from. And I've said this before, and then I hadn't developed it sufficiently to articulate it. And then you then start reacting in an angry way, or it always comes out in some way. the frustration that builds inside. And we have played their game for far too long. All of us that have our own story. Mm-hmm. It's time they listened to us. Right. We've listened to them and their rubbish, and their repeating false narrative and their history. It doesn't apply to us, because basically everything is being proven to be a lie. But in this country in particular, the history relating to America is nothing like the real history. It's chalk and cheese. And so that's difficult again. And then as you get older, I imagine you always find there's one or two who come to you. Did you find that, or was it much later? At what point did you find an ally, so to speak? Or did you?
Maybe in college I found somebody who I could really talk to about this, but people who also experience the same stuff as we all do here also have their own inner issues they have to work out with. So a lot more than I think more other people show. And so that particular person, I don't know what's really happened to him. So, it was just dealing with their own issues, and they sort of left my life. But for the most part, I really haven't found an ally to talk to about this particular stuff, especially some of my earlier memories or my past life memories that I've had.
Yeah.
And for me, I'll start off with the fact that I do have a lot of past life memories where, especially one in particular, I was on my deathbed, and I remember my wife and daughter next to me. They were crying because I was dying, and I'm not quite sure if it was this planet or another planet, but it was really familiar with the Hindu or Hindi culture, and that was just something that came to me. And I remember just saying that I had a really fulfilling lifetime and that I was ready to go. And then just some seconds later, I kind of went out and died. And I remember other relatives rushing in the door trying to see me as I was going. And there were other lifetimes too where I remember being very abused, but a lot of that particular lifetime I think is blocked, my own protection, where there was a lot of negativity, but it was a lesson that I needed to learn at that particular point in time. And there were also some other lifetimes that I remember where they were learning experiences, and I would get together with, I don't know if you would call them soulmates or friends, but I would get together and I would say, okay, I'm ready to go on and move to bigger challenge. And one of the biggest memories that I think I've had was I was at this sort of place, this kind of white shiny place guarding, and we were heavily attacked and I ran away. And when I was running away, I was really running toward the lower dimensions or whatever you call them. I remember looking at different places and different planets to go to because I felt really bad about what happened. And one particular place, and this is relating to Stonehenge, and this memory actually came to me after I was, after a couple of years, where I was at this planet. There was some ritual being performed at some Stonehenge-like site, and there was a young child in the middle, and there was, I guess, a ritual to draw another soul in, or to entice the soul into this body. And I remember wanting to go into this particular body because there was a lot of energy I used to repel whatever was chasing me. I just remember being chased by some pretty nasty enemies. And I remember incarnating into the body, and all of a sudden the ritual stopped, and that really screwed me up because whatever it was, I didn't have enough energy to repel whatever the hell was attacking me. And then I left, and I eventually ended up here. And it's a little bit heavy, but I'll go into it. But I remember...
You're doing okay, keep going.
But I remember after that, I came here, and I looked at this planet and realized everything was backwards and twisted, and it was very, very bad. But I thought it was a really cool place to make up for anything bad that you've ever done. Like, it was a really... it was a planet where if you came here and you did good work, you really kind of improved your karma, or whatever you call it. You really made up for a lot of bad experiences. So I remember coming here, and I remember incarnating into the body I was right now, right in front of the preschool when I was like 3 or 4, and then, it was like 1, 2, 3, I was here, I repelled whatever was attacking me, and whatever the hell was following me was all over this planet as well. So, it was like nasty looking demons, completely deformed, I guess is the best way of describing it. And just after that moment, I was in this crowd, very lost, until my grandmother eventually found me and brought me home that particular afternoon from preschool. And that for me is a very defining moment in my life because I don't know whether I joined another part of myself, merged with another part of my soul here, or whether I incarnated into a body that didn't have a soul, but that kind of memory really stuck in my mind and really kind of defines who I am at this point because it really helped me, whatever happened there, remember a lot of the past life memories that I've had. And since that time, too, I've had a lot of other experiences that I can confirm from talking with family members. Although I don't really go heavy into this with family members, if we talk about seeing particular entities, there was one point, and I'll go into this next, where when I was younger, still living in Queens, I would see these white orbs. And these white orbs, I thought they were human orbs. I thought even one might have been a dog. And when I was awake at night, I pretended to be asleep when I wasn't, I would see these white orbs all over the place. And for whatever reason, I knew there was a boundary that existed between my room and my parents' room toward the front of the house. So there was a boundary for these orbs. I also had a memory that these orbs died in a fire in a house. This was a very, very vivid memory that came to me after asking about how did these entities come here and are kind of stuck here. It was, I got this image of a fire burning from a candle that ran too low, and the wax hit the table and the whole place burned. And there was an incident, I remember one time, where I was like, oh, I want to catch one of these people in the act, where one of the female orbs came in and manifested as her human form and tried to either tuck my brother in or whatever it was. And I got up immediately and started shouting, started screaming. My parents woke up and everything. And they immediately just were very angry with me. I could sense that, and went away. And for me, that was a very... I regret doing that because they were trying to do a good thing, and they also got their revenge a little bit later, where I remember walking toward the back of, this is an apartment complex that my grandfather used to own. So there were two apartment complexes, and my family lived in the front, and there was a back one. And there was a door for the back one that I was opening, and I remember opening the one in the back door, and all of a sudden, not like 3 feet or 10 feet in front of me, like 3 inches in front of me, there's this guy with a Polish cap, like staring at me, and I'm like running away, and it's starting to chase me, and I'm stumbling as it's chasing me, and I just start running toward the front, and I just remember being really scared and stumbling, and all of a sudden when I got to the point where I thought it couldn't reach me, it just disappeared. And I remember talking to a couple family members about that, and they said, oh, you know, they don't really like to talk about it, but they had saw the same exact person describe the same exact way I had, that had chased me. So that was a big confirmation for me. The other thing, too, was at another grandparent's house, there was a particular darkness or sort of entity looking at you, or I felt that in one of the rooms there. And it, I was really didn't like to go into that particular room. I later found out that another family member on that side of the family also felt the same way. And that was also another confirmation. And I think it was about 2015, 2016, I no longer felt that particular entity or maybe portal was there anymore. So I know you talked about how a lot of work was done in New York City. So it could very well be that this particular entity or whatever darkness or whatever that was removed, but that was sort of the status at that point in time where I didn't feel it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of work done on the higher level between 2000, particularly in this last 4 years. Not so much this year. There's minor things to attend to, but there was a lot of energy work done between 2012 and 2016, where certain structures were collapsed and certain entities were stopped from interfering and certain entities left. So certain, of course, during that time also led to the collapse of the control system that we've had here. You know, with the Draco, the parents and the coven started collapsing because they didn't have that reinforcement that they've always had. And there was a lot of work done in those, particularly 13 and 14, that have brought us to this point now. A lot of that stuff I haven't really covered in the shows for various reasons, but there was an awful lot of outside work done that enabled to level the playing field, because we're dealing with a lot of dark magic, a lot of illusion, mirror tech, you name it. They were, negative frequencies and using certain other technology that they were using for rogue purposes, again, to keep us trapped in the illusion. And a lot of that collapsed in 13, 14 and 15, and so much so that 2016 was relatively quiet because they were waiting for that 4-year loop and to complete their cycle, which they failed to do. And I knew that back in August of 15, but we had to let the movie play out, and things that should have happened on a better front and manifest in a better way would take place in 17, what should have took place in 13. So that's part of the aspects of that. So these experiences, and I'm going to cover some aspects of it, it's given you a lot of hidden knowledge in many ways. So you, unlike many, will not fear death, given you know that is life after death. Is that something that gives you confidence and spares
Exactly. Yeah, I have very little, if none, fear in death. I don't have any fear in death because I feel like I've experienced it already. So it's really kind of silly to worry about dying when you've already done it. And I think a lot of what I remember too is because I decided that I rather remember who I was than try to give myself an advantage by getting knowledge that could help me in this particular lifetime. So I think at one point in this experience, I made that decision where I said I want to know who I am, and I think it's more important to know who I am than know how to do calculus or something that might help me out on this planet. And I don't regret that at all, because I think it's super important that we all remember who we are. As you said, we're all souls. We're not just a body here.
No.
And I think a lot of us, even myself, tend to forget that or even doubt that.
Yes.
I'm just here to encourage people not to really fear, because fear is just, false evidence appearing real.
But if time, maybe you want to talk about that, and then we'll get into some aspects of.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I think they're messing with the show a bit, actually. You mentioned you had no change there then, a strong connection in a past lifetime to a certain individual, and you may have played a similar role.
Yes, I've always had a connection with St. John the Baptist and his story, and I really didn't know his story a bit until later on, but I've always had this connection with it, and I felt like I played that particular role where, I was there to go out to really kind of to help reveal the truth for people, to be that particular person to aid in that, and just go forward with that in my life. Kind of the same thing. I think St. John the Baptist was also exiled to an island at one point and left there, and I kind of felt that this was the same thing I had done in a previous lifetime. And I don't say that I was St. John the Baptist, because I feel like this script that's being played here, it gets played all over the place.
Yes.
And I think it's not unique. It goes throughout the whole. Like, if you look at different scripts that have played, the Jesus script or whatever. I mean, the Jesus script has been played I don't know how many times on this planet alone.
Yes, absolutely.
Let alone maybe on other planets or elsewhere. But I just kind of felt that was a very big and important role, and one that I really liked in past lifetimes, although I don't really remember too much about it. I kind of felt like that was one of my favorites and one of the connections I've had to. And that was more of a memory I've learned later as well. So some of the memories I've had of my past I started out with, but others I've asked for and I've gotten them when I needed to.
So do you feel your previous lives, you may have been a teacher of sorts, and this is probably why certain people struggle at school, because what they're teaching is rubbish. Is that some aspect, do you feel?
I think so. Yeah, I think learning a lie is really difficult because it's so contrary to this inner belief that we all know, and there's resistance from your whole essence to fight that indoctrination.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but there's that's why it's so difficult to teach young people. But eventually, if you pound them enough, and especially if you pound them since the day they're born or even before, it can be very, very hard to fight that.
Yeah.
Because at certain points, some people have more resistance to it than others. And I never believed the whole, this is how the story in the Middle East was. I mean, at one point I did, but then as I learned and got older, that story, I didn't really stick with it. It really unfolded on itself. And I would here and there write on my tests some essays that weren't necessarily in popular opinion, so to say, especially relating to Palestine and Israel. So those were some ways I was able to kind of outlet my the frustration I had over the lies they would teach you, but there weren't really too many ways of doing that.
So, in essence, before we go into the rest of your story, for the likes of people who listen to this show, the last 4 to 5 years has been extraordinary in many aspects. To find out you're not alone, you're not a conspiracy nut, you're not unsane, and there's lots of people around who have had similar experiences but have been chastened into a different way of life than they naturally want. So is that something you've gained from over the last 4 or 5 years, seeing so many people now wake up and have the courage to come forward and speak and say, this happened to me. I didn't really believe that the dream time is real, and it's not. And all these doubts, and suddenly these doubts are all being eroded away. Is that something you felt?
Absolutely. I also felt, especially from the past people who have come on your show, more courage to tell my story. And I think the most difficult thing for all of us, as we mentioned before, is accepting the criticism from other people. But again, it's just at this point, I don't need that. We could just ignore them and create the world that we want to. They could have their own little thing there, and that's okay. But for me, I want to go forward and actually understand the truth. I want to hear other people's stories, and even like my own story. Part of it may not make sense right now, and some of it really doesn't make sense to me. But that's because right now, some of it I don't need to know, and it's a learning experience. I feel like a lot of what I'm experiencing right now is what I needed to experience, and that's going to be very beneficial. I think that applies to a lot of people in their soul life. I say the soul life because we're just more than this here.
Yeah.
And I think, just coming out and saying it also for me is releasing a lot of tension and energy that would just build up and produce negativity that would just be detrimental to me. Yeah.
Yes. So, I think it kind of gets overlooked as we all get bogged down with negativity at times. There's so much evil and bad going on around the world. But the fact that we're able to do these shows and it encourages people to be themselves is, to me, is a progression. And this is what we're all here for at the end of the day, to develop and progress in the right manner. I mentioned on Chloe's podcast before, is the cabal actually showing us a life lesson of how not to be. So when we go forward into our next life, and our ego may go out of balance, and you remember what we suffered in here, I think we'll be a lot more in a more beneficial position to go, you know what, that is not correct. Everyone has a role in life. There's no categories and labels and boundaries and borders and all that nonsense. It's all about divide and conquer. So, carry on.
I was never really a big fan of religion or, you were black or you were white. For me, I was very fortunate in a way because I never grew up with these prejudices. I generally saw everybody as equal. And I think even though I lived in an area where you're mostly white and you were either Catholic or Jewish or Asian, I was never really affected by, there's a Protestant over there. We can't have them as friends. So I was very fortunate in that, and I never really believed what they told you in religion class, and it was just a bunch of baloney. It was, even though I held that in my mind, it was, it's all lies, and they always pick and choose what they want to apply to. I mean, if you really apply the whole Bible to something, we all should be executing each other,
Yeah. Well, I think it was you I spoke to yesterday, and I mentioned if religion was so good, and 4.5 billion on this planet are following it, why aren't they all nice people?
You did mention that.
If it was such a fantastic concept, you would have 4.5 billion people living in a caring, sharing world. But they're not. So then, to me, even though I knew from a young age, you look at it from an overview point of view. What's it actually doing? Is it improving your life, or is it not? Well, clearly it's not. Because clearly there's not 4.5 billion on this planet who are caring and sharing and looking after each other. And that's when the program, which is what it is, breaks down. Because there's no answer to that conundrum. If it was so good and so beneficial and so love and so light, we'd have loads of people on this planet all looking after each other. And what we've got is a disaster where society does some heinous things all for the love of money. It never ceases to amaze me the depths some people will go to earn money. Mm-hmm. Again, it's another energy illusion. You use your energy to work so you can earn money to buy rubbish. You can't even call it food these days. And religion's the same thing. It's giving your power away. When really, if it was of any value, it would be teaching self-empowerment. But it's not. It's all about giving your power away, just giving your energy away, which is illusion and harvesting and all the connotations that brings. Now, one of the things before, we'll probably go into a music break shortly, mm-hmm. But you mentioned about in the Ghost and Orbs section that mm-hmm. you felt New York was generally worse than Long Island. Why do you say that?
Just because the darker entities that I felt there in New York were, they had a much more darker intent. I don't know the best way of putting it, but their more evil or darker energy was stronger in New York City. Yeah. it was just like that. And I'm not saying Long Island was a lot better. There's a lot of bad stuff on Long Island.
Yes, there
We're
was.
talking projects. We're talking Plum Island there. There's some horrible stuff, but it was generally a lot worse. And I feel like it is a lot worse in the cities where there's more people and more energy to loosh off of than where it's less dense.
Yeah, well, we covered, and Chloe's covered in a document about egregores, and New York is littered with them. The statues and the cubes and all kinds of other symbolic buildings. And of course it was also the landing stage, Ellis Island, and some of the atrocities that went on there when they were bringing people from Europe and other parts of the world here, and all that pain and anguish. And it sticks. It's the energy that sticks. But, so that's why New York is worse than others. And then, of course, you've got the UN building, which is massive egregore, because it's part of the control system. And, people will always blame, well, New York's kind of a hotbed with hot, temperamental people. You've got the Italian and the Irish, who have a temperament issue in general, and then you got the Jewish aspect, who are told that they're more special than anybody else, and so you've got right from the off, you've got a mix there that's not going to work well in harmony with anything, and they do this deliberately. Make no mistake about it, they do it deliberately. And but Long Island, oh boy.
Oh yeah. I can't even tell you how corrupt the county I is in. I think mostly the eastern part of Long Island is a lot worse than the western part in terms of these projects.
Yeah. But they largely got dealt with in around November of 13. Cobra talks about plasma weaponry, and that's where the main plasma beam was coming in, and that was coming from the higher dimensions, and that's why that particular island was so strong. And that weapon, or that system, was largely rendered mute in late November of 13 or late November of 14, just before Bush Senior went into hospital. They are related. So you had probably the last thing before we go into a music break, you had a out of body watching a Disney show, of all things. Of course, that's another egregore in itself.
Yes. So this one is an interesting experience because it was a Disney show called So Weird. And the reason why I'm going to call this show a Disney mistake is because this show actually told you a lot of truth. It would always start off with, something E.T. or something extra dimensional or, ghost or whatever it was. And I actually replayed this show recently. There was a lot of truth in there that may have woken me up, but there was one particular episode I remember being so scared of that it actually pushed me out of my body. And I remember seeing more of these reptilian-like beings, instead of these more black orbs that were there. They were more reptilian. And, I don't remember too much about what happened, but I remember floating like right above my body and just being super scared about that whole thing. And I don't know if I was a protected spirit, and in many ways I do feel like some other entity is really protecting me a lot, because I've had a lot of near-death experiences, both physically and sort of almost not making it back to my body in time, where I felt like somebody was just there to help me, or some of these bad entities just couldn't touch me the way they wanted to.
Yeah.
But I remember just the thing about that experience I remember is seeing those entities, those more reptilian-like entities, and one of them just kind of pushing me back into my body at some point, and being back to where I was. But that was just a very interesting experience, because I'd never scared myself out of my body before. I mean, we talk about scaring the living heck out of us, scaring ourselves out of our body, but I literally was scared out of my body at that point. And
do you feel that was a past life? There was a trigger in there that was a past life memory?
Well, the scene was some sort of ghost attacking the main character on the show, because the ghost was jealous of humans. So that was basically the scene. And pretty much she almost died, but her father, who was dead, his spirit came to save her, pretty much is how it went. Maybe it could have been some sort of trigger.
Something to think on.
Yeah, it could have been.
Well, basically, the ghost world, or the ghost realm, is all around us.
Right.
We all operate in the same space in many ways, and occasionally, because our eyesight has been manipulated, where we see in a very short bandwidth, and our hearing also, we only get the occasional glimpses of these orbs or entities. The body will tell you, but too many don't recognize their own intuition. Like when you walk into a room and one person just feels really off, and you just shake your head and go, "Oh, I'm being silly." But no, those people are really off. That's your higher self going, stay away from this person. This person doesn't resonate. And then you'll come up to another person who you've never met in your life, and suddenly you can talk about anything.
Right.
What you'll find is your soul family. And it's about being able to recognize. It always gets passed off as synchronicity or this and that. No, it's just reminders, because we all know everything. We've just forgotten. And it's about putting all the pieces of the puzzle back together again. And the ghosts aspect is they're caught in the evolutionary scale, where they're stuck in the etheric. They haven't gone to the lower astral. They may not want to go to the lower astral, because that's where all the entities and disease comes from, the lower astral. That's where cancer comes from. And they would like to get back into the vessel, because the vessel, or the physical vessel, provides that energy field with a security and a safety. And that's why they appear, and they haven't been able to cross over, where they can then go to whatever personal evolutionary level they've attained on this planet, whether it's the lower astral, the higher astral, which is in essence the biblical version of heaven and hell, and then you've got the four mental planes, and that's where they get stuck. And occasionally we will get fleeting glimpses, and people are starting to see more of these fleeting glimpses, not just the ghosts and the orbs, but old cities appearing and islands appearing and disappearing. They're all there. It's just that they're on a different vibratory frequency than we can interpret. Same as the Draco, they come in and use the vessels. They may look human form, but only because we can't see in that manner. If the vibration frequency changes, you'll see them for what they are.
Yeah.
Which is bone ugly for the start. Maybe we're not quite ready for seeing those type. I know there's some in the group who have seen it, but trust me, it's not.
There's some things I'm really not ready to see, and I know that. But you're absolutely right.
And then I relate this story on one of the shows, I think, or I may have said it in private, but I'll say it again. When there was some sort of a meeting taking place in dream time, and I knew it was going in, and these people will be telepathic, and I was standing outside the door waiting to go in, telling myself, don't say, oh my God, you're effing ugly. As I knew I was meeting a particular being that's really unpleasant on the eyes, and I go, no, think something different. And I walked in, and it was the first thought, and you could see the smile on the face, and the response back, well, you absolutely smell awful. So, as they think the human body odor is not too pleasant to them. Well, they're unpleasant on the eyesight, so. But I was like freaking out. No, clear your mind. So that's some aspect when we return to the organic and full organic, and we get our telepathic abilities back. You can't lie then, as it all comes out.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be kind of unpleasant. And this is part of the soul journey now, where I spoke about the masks of illusion coming down. Because they have to come down for us to experience the real truth. How can you demand truth from governments or the cabal or the history makers when you're not truthful with yourself? It's not really stacking up, and so a lot of people have now asked for the truth, and we are getting it. Some feel it's going too slow, but others feel it's going too quickly now because there's that much volume of it. And so we'll get into that in after this music break, when we'll start talking about your journey and where it all started from, and how you woke up, as we call it.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot for sure. Yeah.
So you picked the first one, The Voice, and you picked this song as well, which is another favourite of mine, and we'll be back after this song. Hi all, and welcome back to An Evening with Thomas with guest Karl Appel. We had an interesting first hour where Karl has explained some of his experiences, which in general terms in life is kind of extraordinary, and this is the difficulty we've all been through, where we've had experiences that can't be described too easily, and certainly can't be relayed, because of the way society has been set up, and it's difficult. So that song, Karl, You Raise Me Up, you've done a rather good job raising yourself up, with the way you carry yourself off. But you also mentioned yesterday you had a lot of help and support from your parents.
Yes. So, in general, my parents have been really supportive of me, and, although, we're all programmed to believe certain things like the doctor's right, or, other general programs. For the most part, they've been really supportive and just, whether it be helping me out financially with something here and there if I need it, or whether it's just needing somebody to talk to. I know more recently we've definitely talked about the past and my childhood and just trying to reconcile that. So that's been kind of an uplifting thing for all of us.
Yeah.
And I'm just very fortunate in that regard.
Good. My parents were a bit of a disaster. It was a different time, different country as well. It's a lot more, it's not as open in Britain as it is here, where you can at least express yourself. It's a lot more restrictive in England. And in essence, the people police themselves over there, and not in a good way either. And I felt badly restricted, and it was one of the reasons when I came to America the first time, how different I felt. I felt like home, and I could just be myself. But my parents, my mother is making an attempt. She's now asking questions and seeing things differently, which is good, but it's still, he's still picking and choosing what to say and what not to say, and that's the difficulty. So you've gone through some of your experiences, but what really started you on your real journey? Was there a particular show or a particular website or whatever that got you learning and involved in all the alternative media, as it's called?
Yes, it was actually on the History Channel when they were doing specials and shows on UFOs. I knew there was something there, and it just really fascinated me and turned me on. And because at that time, which was when I was 13, so this would have been 12 or 13 years ago, when the internet really came into play, I had a lot of ability just to go online and watch all these videos or read these blogs, and I had, from there, just had this curiosity to just continue forward. And I would just watch different things about UFOs, and, that led to other related videos related to aliens, and then time traveling, and then, spiritual realm. It just all connected with each other from that point on.
Yes.
And it was really an eye-opening experience. One thing, though, that I do remember very clearly was there's a little voice inside of me when I was doing this search, was saying, "Oh, don't look at anything further." There was like this voice, and I had the decision at that point to decide whether it was worth continuing my journey or just going back into, this is the way the world is, whatever. And I just chose to overcome that voice and continue to do more searching on different videos and everything. And that really led me to different places, ranging from Project Camelot, Project Avalon, and I actually left Project Avalon because everybody there was just getting way too negative, and I knew there was something really off with that particular place. Yeah. It was like all of a sudden everybody's just saying, "Oh, just put your head in a hole and, the world's going to hell." So, and everybody, despite being so negative, was always had this time to talk about how everything was so negative. So it was really a downer for me. And as I just searched more and more, I've just kind of developed myself, and it took many years for me to put together the whole piece. And this is something I don't mention to too many people, but as I learn more about my health, so the fluoride and the minerals and whatever it was, I decided to get off of the fluorinated toothpaste, and I decided to take more of these vitamins to help me out. And as I did that, especially getting off the fluoride, that really helped me put everything together. I don't know what it was, but a couple weeks after I started just using fluoride-free toothpaste, it all clicked that, everybody's in this together. There isn't a politician that's there for you. They're all lying to you, pretty much. And I had allergies that were horrendous, where I could not breathe through my nose for 9 months of the year. But once I started taking these minerals and different vitamins from this guy, Jeff, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. He was an alternative nutritionist. Once I took vitamins that he recommended, my allergies disappeared. And that kind of helped me also think and connect the pieces together in my head better, and really kind of put me to where I am today.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is we have many deficiencies in the diet because the food, particularly the GMO food, is about stripping the vitamins and the nutrients out of it. So in essence, you might as well eat a cardboard box. And that's the reality. And, the body needs a whole range of different chemicals and metals to make it function as a proper unit. And this is why the likes, you said, the guy's no longer with us. They're bumping these people off, the holistic people. It's why they got rid of all the native people, or committed genocide on the native people all over the world, because they had the oral history, not the books. So it could always be passed on, but you can get books and set fire to them. The Catholic Church has done that right throughout the ages. And as we go forward, you'll realise that these minerals are helpful, but eventually, once you find out who and what you are, you also realise you won't need them. But it's a good jump down or step down from the pharmaceuticals to the minerals, to then put back the nutrients and the vitamins and the metals and the chemicals that the body needs. And then once you really step into being you and who you are, the idea of taking pills will seem ridiculous. And this is what humanity will go back to eventually. All the plants are there in a state of emergency. You have the ability within yourself to fix anything. And of course the pharmaceutical people and the insurance people don't want you to know this, and this is why these people in the holistic are being killed. Because once people find out and start moving out of their financial tyranny, which is basically what they're doing, and you can get yourself into a better state where then you are more responsive to the spiritual side, and once you reconnect with nature, and then you can make the next leap and go, you know what, I remember who and what I am, and I can go and fix that particular disease by doing this, just by your own thought process. And to a lot of people that's kind of off the wall, but I've seen it done. So, so fluoride's one aspect. We've got the issues with the chemtrails and the nanoparticles, and we've got the issues with the food being not food. Cheese these days is like plastic.
I had cheese that tasted like plastic. I'm telling you, it was like the cheapo cheese, and I didn't realize I grabbed it. And I mean, I'd rather have had plastic than that. I'll tell you. So, it's pretty bad, especially with just it's like you don't even feel full because they don't have the minerals.
No.
So you want to get more and eat more, and then that causes you to spend more. So, and that's part of their whole.
And also to go out of balance and go overweight, which is the one way to bring in more disease. So then you stay on the wheel and buy more pills, and then you go on a diet, and then you miss other things, and it's just spinning wheels all the time.
Yeah.
But cheese, that's not what it used to be. I'm sure the milking credit cards, and you just shred it and put it into the cheese. It's just not cheese, is it? So but, you've been living your life with an autistic brother, which can be challenging. Can you talk a bit about that aspect of it? Do you think that's some of the causes of what we just described may have also played into that?
Well, I don't want to blame anybody in particular. Because we're all part of the system. But it could very well be, and I say that because, I don't think it's just one particular cause. I think it's a combination of certain things, because a lot of people are very mono as, vaccines equal autism, where it could be vaccines plus GMOs plus chemtrails equal autism, or some combination of it. And I think a lot of people miss that part.
Yeah.
And it's kind of detrimental to me because, at least I see it as detrimental because, you're trying to make it simple to explain, but, a lot of times you need those other factors involved with it to show the proof of it. And, for me, it's, I don't like to just say it's one cause, because there's a lot of different things.
A good point you've made, because, even myself, I can be guilty of that, on the show. But I often talk about the sleight of hand, the hidden. They'll push one thing forward, and that's the hand you see, but you're not seeing the puppet. And it's the same thing, vaccines has been proven to cause autism, but it hasn't caused autism in every child. Why? Because genetically we're all different.
Exactly.
And so what may cause the vaccines may be the cause for one child, but that same vaccine might not be the same for 8 or 9, but may cause other issues, given what's in them, which then can lead to autism or other diseases, which is the way. And again, you're back on the wheel. Then you need their drugs, then you need their diet, and on it goes.
Yeah, and it could very well be. I really don't have enough information about, what could have caused it, but could have been a bad diet, it could have been vaccines, it could have been chemtrails starting at that particular time. I don't really know, but there is definitely a huge spike out of nowhere where, 1 in 10,000, and even today, it's like 1 in 20,000 Amish get autism, but it's somehow 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 for everybody else, and nobody even ponders to think, why is that? You know what I mean? It just was like, so we're just going to ignore this here and, in trying to find the particular causes for it. And it's because, for the most part, they sort of know the correlation, but they don't want to say because it's going to lose them a bunch of money.
Yep.
And it's going to expose them. But, yeah, it could very well be.
A lot of the issues is people, I've covered this before, but it's important to reiterate this over again, is people think they haven't got the capability of doing X, Y, and Z, when in reality they've gone off a different alphabet altogether. You know, the idea that certain drugs are genetically related is not something that's even prevalent in the awake community, never mind the sleepers. And they have, with the research, was they have a lot of the old knowledge that came from the Atlantans, was they were the geneticists, and of course the Draco were also meddling with things, whereby a certain drug can wipe out one whole race. You know, one of the ones that was mentioned in a piece I got is they've got a vaccine or a drug that can wipe out the black race overnight. And it's getting people to understand they have that capability. Then you get to the core of, well, are they bumping off just the homeless people, or are they deciding that they don't like Irish people, or they don't like British people, or they just don't like anybody? You know. But people need that knowledge, is they have the capability to produce drugs or vaccines that can wipe out a specific target. And that's something that people need to consider. You know, it's like technology. People think, oh, it's the future, it's the future. No, it's the past. And long past. It's just they introduce it at certain times for certain agendas. And none of it is really for our benefit. So getting back to your brother, I know with autistic children you need a lot of attention. So was that difficult for you? And
it was, because even though my mother was a stay-at-home mom, she needed to spend a lot more time with my brother and trying to help him out than she could with me necessarily. And that, in some essence, was good for me because I had more freedom to be on my own and actually go out and explore these certain things. So when I was a teenager, for me, I wasn't, I didn't have mom necessarily looking after me the whole time or trying to monitor every single thing I would do, because she was spending a lot of time with my brother.
Yeah.
So for me, it allowed me a good amount of freedom. But yeah, in certain aspects of it, there was a lot of time I didn't really have with my mom, because she was just helping with my brother, and it was rough for her. I think it was more, I feel very bad for her in many ways because, she was, a victim like my brother just from, these agendas out there. And it's rough because I hear not only is my brother autistic, but I hear so many more people having autistic family members. I have to believe the numbers are higher than they even tell you.
Yeah.
Whether it's autism or whether it's some other disease related to that, where you just can't function as well in the mind. It was difficult, and it was more I feel bad for her and my brother than anybody else. In the past I did blame her for certain things, but really it was whatever I did wrong or thought needed to be done, it's really like my fault, for things that I wanted to do or or things that, I didn't get to, a lot of the things that I wish or could have occurred, they're really my own fault, I'm not trying to say, oh no, you didn't really do anything wrong, but a lot of times we like to blame other people for our problems.
Yep.
When in fact we have to look at ourselves and say, you know what, I'm here today at this particular moment. Am I looking at the past to say, something 10 years ago could have been better and I'm upset about it today? Or am I going to move forward from this point in time and make the world that I live in the world I want to live in today?
Yeah.
And so I'm choosing now to move beyond whatever issues I've had in the past and just live in the world I want to today. And there doesn't need to be any more conflict about what could have been or what is, or it's about moving forward in this present moment and creating what we want.
But in essence, from an overview point of view, whilst you may not have been happy at the time that your mother couldn't spend more attention on you, and it all went to the brother. In essence, it also long term helped you to be personally responsible for you. Is that something you're experiencing now?
Yes, to be personally responsible and to have the opportunity to have more freedom for myself. Yeah. I might have not had the opportunity as quickly to be where I am today if it wasn't for me at a younger age just being more independent. So in that regard, it worked out, and I just want to put that out there. I don't really blame anybody for the past anymore. Especially the past couple years, I've really tried to work that out. And at this point in time, it just let's just move on from that. What was, and that's where I want to stand with that.
Yeah.
So
I went through that myself. I just seemed like I was battling with everyone when I was younger. In a frustration, and I had this knowledge and certain experiences that you just can't get out, which then eases the burden and elevates your own confidence. And it just turned. My youth was a bit of a shit show, to be quite honest. And I don't think the parents helped, but I don't think I helped either. And some of the teachers certainly didn't help. I just felt you then become almost paranoid where you think they're targeting you. And yes, I have been targeted for various reasons. But also you got to look back and go, well, I wasn't exactly an angel either. I did play a significant role in it. And it has a snowball effect. That you get a reputation, and none of the children, none of the children I played with when I was younger, none of their parents wanted them to be with me because I was always getting into trouble. The minute I got out of home, I went wild. Because it was too restrictive in home and it was too restrictive in school. I was kind of a free spirit. So I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, and I know too, for me, I used to bring home these school projects that my mom would help me out with, and she would really get upset with me because I would always tell her like a day before it was due or 2 days before it was due, I have a big school project that is due. And, that didn't help me, I could have at least told her a little bit sooner than 2 days or the day before, so. So I totally.
Yeah. So the next topic we're going to go into, is a bit like Back to the Future.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us your experiences, because you had experiences, what you've described as time traveling. So can you relay some of that?
Yeah, I think this was definitely, it wasn't time traveling per se, but it was more of a manifesting, the time traveler of some sort. So I was on the internet one time and I was doing a research, or I was watching videos on time traveling, and there was one particular guy, and I can't remember whether he was related to John Teeter, but he was like a middle-aged white guy with glasses. I remember his face, but I can never find him. I mean, he was talking about time travelers from the year 3700 or something, but also more recently too. And I was just so fascinated with this idea and thought that for really the first time, and probably the only time as of now, I had this very pure creational energy in my heart that I felt. It was really pure creational energy, and I knew that's what it was. And I really had this strong thought about meeting one of these sort of time travelers. And this guy was talking about there being a special symbol on the car, and the car was out of shape at the time, and whatever it was. And I remember having this, just this pure creational energy, and for about 15 minutes, 30 minutes, I was just thinking about this with this energy, and I went to sleep in bed. Might have been a couple days later, so 2 to 3 days later. And this is a kind of a theme in my life where a lot of the creational things that I've manifested, especially further back, they're actually quicker now, took 2 to 3 days to come up. And I think that was what you had mentioned.
Yeah.
There was some car outside. It was a really out-of-place car, and it was just right in front of the driveway. And it was, I remember, and I usually don't notice anything outside, but I noticed that particular thing outside. And about 20 minutes later, it was still there, so I just decided to go outside and see what was up. So I went out there, and I went to the car, and I just kind of knocked on the window saying, hey, everything okay? And the guy was in a little bit of a panic, like, oh no, I'm going to get going, whatever. So it looked like he had some sort of map of the area that was like a hand map that was completely different, but I recognized one intersection. And then I realized there was like the symbol on the car that I saw in the videos and everything. And, it was all really quick, but I saw it, and then all of a sudden he, got out, and then, he just went away. I didn't mention anything to him about me thinking he was a time traveler or anything like that, but I was like, oh my God, I literally saw everything that I thought I would see if I saw a time traveler. It was the symbol, the car was out, it was like some car I'd never seen before, and all that, and I've always thought I manifested that particular moment in time where this time traveler, the creational energy that I had manifested at that instance, and so that was sort of my time traveler experience that I've had that I really never talk about. So,
time traveler is kind of the popular theme to put out and the proper terminology, but these experiences are not time related. And yes, we're used to linear time in here, but there's also lateral time, where there is no time. And so you've put out the thought form and the energy that you want an experience, and it hasn't gone into the linear, it's gone to the lateral. So you've got a flat line, which is the linear, and time goes on, and the clock goes around 24 hours, and you've got a vertical timeline. And this is where some of the magic comes in, how they can mess with time, as we call it. And this is where some of people who go out, as we call it, during the dream time, end up on the lateral. And not always do you remember when you come back. You might get a glimpse of it, and because there is no time on the vertical line, you could be away for thousands of years, but only been out of the vessel for 2 hours. How are you going to possibly remember? And so this is, again, that's something that needs to be taught on a worldwide level. Some of the real ancients knew about this, but there is no time. Time is part of the construct to get you regulated. And you, like I said, you go out of the vessel, and depending on where you go, because the further you go out, the more time, as we call it, is distorted. And so what you've experienced is, for want of a better term, a time jump. You've pulled in the energy from the lateral to the now. And that's something that maybe you need to, and anyone who's listening, to consider. Linear time doesn't really exist. It's a part of the illusion. And this is why they can do 4-year loops and all that other nonsense. So, yes, you did create it. And don't let anybody else tell you any different. And if you can create that, then the next stage is, what else can I create that's going to be better? Not just for the self, but for the all. And that is the next learning curve. You know, I have created that situation. Well, that was nice, and I saw that. What else can I create? What else can I do that can change things for the benefit of the all? And again, that's something you need to ponder on after this show. So, the main thing that most people know you for, as you've been on the show and you came on, is the National Liberty Alliance. How did you get involved in that, and what do you do in National Liberty Alliance, and how is it going?
So that's a good question. I actually got involved with National Liberty Alliance through the interview that Drake had on Cosmic Voice. So I had jumped from Project Camelot to Cosmic Voice through hearing about David Wilcock. And so I heard Drake, and I was just really interested in that. And this was about 2012. So from 2012 to, I want to say 2014, I had listened to Drake probably weekly or bi-weekly. I was just really interested in what he had to say. I was in the false illusion that, things are coming in 2 weeks. I was in that. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. So I was going through a really down time, the period 2013 to 2014. A relationship of mine was kind of falling apart. I had some other bad things happen to me, like there was a tumor in my leg that had to be removed. I nearly killed myself in a car accident. It was just bad thing after bad thing.
Yeah.
So at one point, after in 2014, I really asked the universe itself to kind of help me go into like this direction. I wanted a group organization to really go in and help with, because I felt like there wasn't really anything at that time I could go and join. And it was like a week later, I had heard John on Drake's show, and I just said to myself, okay, this is the show that I was called to hear, and this is the organization I want to hook up with. And I joined. I was more involved locally, and then a year later I became more involved nationally with helping with their technology stuff. So I help with website improvements here or there when I have some time, or some organizing, but not really as much anymore. And as time went on, we got involved with different things. We tried different strategies. At this point in time, it's really the same issue that we've had. It's about enforcement. We really have trouble finding people who are or have the courage to go out and enforce. And that's just that. You could be right all you want, but if you have nobody who's going to enforce it, and you don't want 20 different people from your local community going out because it just looks like you're overthrowing the government is what they would think, and declare martial law and everything. So you got to do it right as well, and you got to look legitimate. So these are just some of the issues that we're having right now. And the I've just been involved with that still. I've had my ups and downs. We've had our ups and downs throughout there. I think having my own business allowed me a little bit more time than most to help out with some stuff there, but in general, I've just been mostly doing technology stuff for them now. And I visited, and it's nice because Gerard and John live relatively close to me.
Yeah.
They live like about an hour and a half. John lives from me, and Gerard less than an hour. So I've actually been able to visit them in person and see them. So it's kind of nice to be part of an organization where you can also visit the leaders of the organization and know, hey, they're actually real people and they're not CIA agents.
Yeah.
It's nice to know. It would have been a really, really interesting disguise they put if they were CIA agents or something. But no,
this is the beauty of the internet and also the downside. And of course, America is in essence, I'm talking about the lower, is 48 different countries. They may call it states, but they're big enough. Yeah. Some of the states are bigger than countries. And you go from one coast to the other, and it's 3,500 miles. It's not round the corner.
Yeah.
So I've never met Drake in person. Even now, I've met some of the members. I met 2 of the members last week. We had a really good time. I think I would like to meet more. Because I'm just this voice on the radio, and people can see my picture, but you want to get the resonance and the energy that people can pick up. Is he real? Is he not? And the fact that you've gone and met John, his heart's in the right place, and I think he's fighting a battle that needs to be won. But until people show enough courage, this is the problem with Drake. Drake asked for support from the militia, and no one responded. And I mean no one. It's all right, them training, but you've got to have the courage of your convictions, and this is where we the people in general are lacking at the moment. Talk is one thing, actions is another. So it's kind of cool that you've met John. I look forward to meeting all the members one day. So basically what you see, it's always nice, is what you hear, as you don't always see. And John does radio as well. Like me, he's got the perfect face for radio. Sorry, John. But it's always nice to meet the guy in person, or the girl in person as well. So, has John done anything? Probably due to bring John back on, or yourself to give an update. Maybe we'll leave that for another time. But where are we going to go next? ET disclosure.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, for me, I think one of the biggest moments was, this is when I was really in my lowest point in 2014. I had gone to the same place in my college, just looking up at the sky, just kind of asking for something. And I remember I was there for like 3 straight days, and nothing really happened the first 2 days. And then the third day, I was seeing everything moving in the sky, different colors blaring. You know, it wasn't an airplane going by. Let's just say it was a lot more than that. And I felt somebody was responding to my request just to see something out there. So for me, that was a very big moment in my ET disclosure because, I don't need somebody to tell me that there's extraterrestrials out there. I already know that for myself. Now, which ones are there out there? I don't really know for certain. It could be, I'm sure there's many, 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 but do I know if there are ones that look like Humpty Dumpty, or or are there ones that are furry cats? I'm not quite sure, but I know there are definitely some out there. So that was my ET disclosure.
Yeah, well, the reality is, whatever you imagine already exists.
Yes.
So if you imagine elephant beings or cats with human bodies, they exist. Well, we already know that from the hieroglyphs. There's cat beings on there. Of course, there's the dog and the bull and all the others that would, that's not people's imagination. That's what they were actually seeing after those monuments were built, or energy machines, as per the pyramids. The idea that the tombs, when there's no tombs, no bodies or tombs ever been pulled out of there, is again part of the illusion and part of the lie to cover up the history, or to continue his story and not our story. So it's good that you have had these experiences, and it's also even better the fact that you are not waiting for somebody else to tell you what you already know. This is a big issue I have on the THI show, is if you've had these experiences, don't be waiting for me or David Wilcock or Obama or Trump or Putin to tell you what you already know. This is part of the problem of humanity on a bigger scale, where we don't trust our own intuition, we don't trust our own heart, we don't hear our own voice, or the little voice, which is actually the bigger voice, not the little voice. And it's all this mistrust. So I'm pleased to hear that you're not waiting for anybody else. It's important, So you've had some dreams about ETs, so you have met some of them. Is that something you wish to talk about?
I've had dreams about, like one dream about being abducted, but that might have been more of a manifestation again. I don't know whether it was I was actually physically abducted, or it just was I met ETs in my dream time. But I've had some experiences with that. I've also had some experiences with demons in my dreams too, or nightmares, especially around the tough years, 2012, 2013. There were a couple times where you had mentioned you had some times where we were really heavily under attack, and I was, looking back, I'm like, I was really heavily attacked during those years too, like with demons trying to get me, and a couple times I didn't think I was going to make it to my body, but I did. So, those were my experiences with that. But I think, what was it? ETs. Yeah, for the most part, I really haven't had too many experiences with meeting ETs in particular. Just either in dream time or whatever, whatever I saw on the...
Question for you, which you may have to ponder after the show, but
Sure.
do you not consider, because you over the last near 2 hours now, you talked about dark energy or dark entities and demons. Do you not consider all of them might, in the real form, be ETs? And that's the terminology. It's a more easier way to explain it rather than talk about the ETs.
Yeah, it could be, but then they're more terrestrial than, well, I guess some of them might actually be terrestrial in some ways, but yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Part of the problem is the ET is kind of a broad sweep.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and which means extraterrestrial means they're not from here, they're not from Terra. But there's beings described as ETs that are from here, and they've been here a long time, and they're below our feet. And are still described as ETs, and some of those beings are some of the clowns that in previous time played the gods. And so there's that aspect to it as well. Right, I think anything else you want to add on the ET disclosure before we have another music break? And then we'll go into some... Good. Right, okay. This is another selection by Karl, and this one is Now We Are Free. Hi all, and welcome back to the final portion of An Evening with Thomas with our guest Karl Appel. And we've had some really interesting discussions in the last 2 hours, and we still have more to come. So the dream time. You've been experiencing quite a few issues in that, and possible ventures. I'd like you to go into mentioning some of them, as these are interesting.
Yeah, so I'll mention to you one of the more recent ones that I've had, and I also had one last night, which was pretty interesting too. But the one that I had recently was after one of your shows. You're talking about Saturn and there being AI around there. And the night after, I actually had a dream where I was in Magic Kingdom, and I was wandering around in one of the mansion areas there. And there was a soul trap, whatever, in one of these buildings, but I kind of knew where it was and was very cautious of it. And I was more of a guy trying to get in, infiltrate, and do my mission, whatever it was. So I went past this place, the mansion place, and I went toward the front of Magic Kingdom. And I remember seeing the people starting to come in for the opening of Magic Kingdom that day. And it was probably around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I was still asleep, and I think it was, I can't tell you what day of the week it was, but I was still asleep. And I remember there being like a console in the middle of it with a connection to Saturn. And people were going right by it because it was, if you imagine people coming into security, and people going toward the entrance, it was more of, it kind of makes like a triangle. And it was like right in the middle of that triangle console. And I remember going to the console, and it like teleported me or connected me to Saturn, and there was an AI there that was screaming when it saw me, and I was just kind of kicking it and punching it. And as I was doing this, I woke up in my body.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, this was a very interesting thing. You had never mentioned anything about Disney in particular related to this, so I thought maybe either this was a mission I did to finish up some stuff, or it was something else. But I had thought when you had mentioned the whole AI thing in Saturn that there was still something left that needed to be done. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I felt something like, there's something that still needs to be done a little bit. And maybe that was just something I had to finish up on my own that night.
That's quite possible. Disney, yeah, it's fantastic, the theme parks, but it has a darker element to it.
Yeah, the energy I thought, going from there was going directly to power the Saturn AI, whatever it was. It was like directly used to take your energy and push it to that, and I was trying to destroy that link, or AI, whatever it was.
Disney also has the contract for ET disclosure. So it's not just a theme park. There's other elements to Disney. They call it the Magic Kingdom for a reason. And of course, people are now becoming aware of some of the issues with the children that goes on there and has been going on. And also, a lot of people don't know about the tunnels that go under Disney and some of the incidents that go on there. Now, the one in Orlando, which is not too far from here, also has tunnels that go through to the military. And this is where they play their magic. And so there's darker elements to it. The Saturn AI, as far as I'm concerned, is no longer an issue. There may have been residual. It's like an echo rather than a real event. So you may have been seeing the echo of what it was, or what you had to experience that to then absorb it within your knowledge, so then you can go forward and go, well, that's now been dealt with from your perspective. But the Saturn and the Moon Matrix again was something that was dealt with when I mentioned earlier about the higher levels back in 2013, 2014. There was a lot of that type of work ongoing at that time. Soul traps went down, plasma weapons were removed, and the being that Chloe covered in her podcast today was removed at that time. Satan, and so you're likely that you witnessed the echo of it, the recording, and you had to experience it yourself to see the end, and maybe you played some role in it in 13 and 14 without realising it, and you had to be shown it again to then experience it for what you think is now, but it was actually back then.
Yeah, it could have been. It really could have been. And so, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. And then, I've had other dreams, especially last night, where I was going over a bridge, and essentially I was like going over a straight bridge, but I was going like going in loops like a roller coaster over this straight bridge. It was really weird. And at the very end, somebody told me that, you didn't really need to make it as difficult as you did. It was just much simpler than what you allowed it to be. And
yes, this is kind of an ongoing thing. There's simple solutions to everything we have, because of the way society is set up, which in any walk of life, banking could be made simpler, education could be made simpler, and more truth for a start. Science could be made simpler if they just stepped off the pedestals that they're so much better than everybody else. And because science appears complex, that it is, when nature is simple.
Yes.
You know, everything is simple, or should be. It's just been made to look complex. It's like law. You mentioned National Liberty Alliance and covering the law. Well, if you go on common law, there's only 4 laws, so it's simple.
Yep.
You don't need all these section 3 blah blah this and paragraph that and babble. No.
Yeah.
So so there's your example in something you're already involved in. It's just made simple so everybody understands it. 4 laws, right. 4 rules, and that's it.
Right.
But on and on it goes,
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you mentioned 13 and 14 as a struggle, because it was a struggle for many who were operating outside of here at that time. There was a lot going on, and so I would suggest to you that you were part of that, and that's why it was manifesting in the awake time, as it's called, when the real time is the dream time, when you can go into lateral. And a lot in here, and there's quite a few in THI and other groups who were doing this type of work at that time, who were going through difficult phases where they were losing partners and loved ones and friends, and accidents were happening, and all kinds of chaos that they would throw at the ones who were doing the dream work, what's known as the dream work. So look at it that way. It's their sign of frustration and desperation that they will throw things at you in the awake phase. That's all it is. It's desperation, because on the bigger picture, through that time period, they lost.
Yeah, and like you said too, I felt over the past year and a half, things have been a lot easier for me in terms of overcoming these sort of issues. Of course, I have more issues balancing myself now with this two-world I guess is the best way to put it. But yeah, no, I felt that before you even mentioned it. Like there were 2 different paths, and it's like, which one do you choose? And it's like another, it's like this game never ends, and it's like,
well, you have to, in essence, everything is 2 worlds, light and dark, good and evil.
Yeah.
The best thing is to balance everything.
Right.
People talk about we live in a patriarchal society, which is one of the biggest illusions on this planet, because we don't. We live in a matriarchal society, and everything's inverted. You inverse, universe, same. It's all a play on words, and and it's not about switching from matriarchal to patriarchal or vice versa. It's about the aspects of masculine and feminine in both sexes merging. Where we as males have a feminine aspect, and we're encouraged, or we have been, though it's changed in the last 30 years. I think there's a lot more men who have developed the better side of the feminine aspect, whereas the females have developed the worst side of the male aspect. And that's been part of the imbalance that's taken place over the last 30 years. You know, and but the two worlds, you know, you've got the sleepers awake and the sleepers, and their reality is just not the same as ours. So there's a disconnect right from the off. They don't see anything. Maybe they can't see anything. Maybe they're not even real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be
because of the simulation and the mirror tech that we've created this situation of how we overcome all these hurdles and go on to being a more developed soul on a higher level.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. There are certainly some people where I just don't get it.
No.
You know, they just don't make any sense. They are okay with one thing, and then when you produce something else, it's just, whoa, can't do that. Yeah, I just don't get it with some people. And, you know, a lot of what we may see here, again, as you described, it kind of resonated with me where a good portion of the people here might not be real. It might just be part of the illusion. And it's really difficult to face that. Like, even the people who you think are real may not be.
No.
It's tough. I mean, who wants to say, hey, you know, you say maybe it's closer to 10 or 15%. I think it may be a little bit closer to 30 to 50. It doesn't really matter, but, you know, we find out these numbers, but even still, it's like, you know, wow, it's like, you were just an illusion, or, you know, who knows, we all could be, you know, we might all be okay, and none of us may be an illusion. You know, really,
there's always
that
possibility. You know, it's one of the things here. I remember putting it out when I was in Cosmic Voice before I became an admin. I was kind of naive in some aspects. I thought, you know, if Americans find out that they've been paying income tax illegally since 1933-34, that would tip the balance. And then the CEO of the IRS goes on the idiot box and tells you it's voluntary. Where's the uproar? And this is part of the problem where life just rolls on, and we're all shaking our heads going, well, can't they see this? They've already been told. And this plays into the Cassandra letter. You know, we fed you the information. You didn't believe the truth that you were told.
Yeah.
But it's
a lot of people don't. Yeah, well, a lot of people don't want to spend the time to free themselves, and that's a big issue. A lot of people just want to be doing the same thing they have been, watching the football game, whatever it is. And to me, it just doesn't make any sense at this point anymore to continue doing the same exact thing, expecting different results.
Absolutely. So, current struggles. Have things moved on from the difficulties in 13 and 14, or you still have residual things that you feel that you have to overcome?
For me, I still have some things I need to overcome. They're all internal, though. And I noticed this more recently where a lot of the unhappiness is not because somebody was doing something to me. It's because there are just some inner things I need to work out for myself. And I think it's just really difficult because we've been programmed in certain ways, and it's still deprogramming myself that it's still that process I need to go through.
Yeah.
So this is one part of it too. You know, I love to share my experience, but I think a part of doing this is also deprogramming myself and the fear that I have of expressing my thoughts. Absolutely. And it could very well be that some of the things I say may not resonate with me in 10 years, and that's okay. But a lot of it still will, and I will have even more information then. And that's just how we need to experience life. We just keep learning and trying to figure out the real truth and make our world a better place. And that's really what I'm about.
Yeah. Keep opening the doors in the dream time is my hint.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because that's your next jump in evolution.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many people, you mentioned earlier that you would run away from a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it in running away from a situation in the awake world is not good, and it's certainly not good in the dream world.
Mm-hmm.
You always turn and face it, no matter how bad it is,
mm-hmm.
because you will always overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes back into the awake world, and the vessel has more confidence to challenge, to deal with the challenges of being in here and what we have to face and put up with. Mm-hmm. Running away from demons doesn't remove the problem. We have to turn and face it, because we are more powerful than them. We are more powerful than the Draco. Yes, they've got technology and all the fun and games. But if they were more powerful than us, they wouldn't feel the need to control us. Because people who want to control others do so out of fear. And so when you're in the dream world and you're facing certain things, whether it be demons or greys or ghosts or whatever, turn and face, don't run. Mm-hmm. Unless you're heavily outnumbered. And even then, you can still come through it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I totally agree with you on that, and I think a lot of us don't realize just how powerful we are as humans. And, I mean, I've always felt that we're just really much more powerful. And I don't mean to sound egotistical or anything as a human, but we're a lot more powerful than most other beings out there, even without trying. And that's just because I've always felt, and you've kind of said this, we're very close to creation.
Yes.
And we just put our intent in the right direction, we can easily overcome any enemy that comes our way. They don't even stand a chance. So, I think it's all about, like you said, opening ourselves up more, especially myself, more in the dream time, kind of understanding that, and really evolving in that direction.
Good. So you went through, about 4 years ago, you mentioned you went through a similar situation, and the loop is real.
Yes. Yeah, the loop is real.
Yes.
It's been, there's a lot of difficulties with potential relationships upcoming that may be challenged, but we'll see how it goes. I have the feeling that this time it'll be a little bit better, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get out of that situation, or at the very least, if it does occur, deal with it better and respond more in a positive way than a negative way. So that's the best I could do, and so I think a lot of us too, if we just do that, we'll realize that we get out of these loops, and I have the feeling that's one way to kind of get out of these loops.
In essence, we are.
Mm-hmm.
In linear time, we're not. In essence, we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of people are now enjoying going to sleep more.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the limitations that you apply in the awake time are not there once you go to sleep. Mm-hmm. So people who want to fly There's many members who mentioned that they fly in their dreams and they would love to fly. That's all it takes, maybe one a time in the future we'll realise that the dream is the real time, and this awake version is actually the dream time. I know that's going to mess with some people's heads. But then this is what these shows are about, is empowering people to get the courage to come forward with their stories, which is their truth. And if people don't choose to believe it, that's their problem, because it's your story, and it's working through the different aspects. What does it all mean? We've all gone through this, and we've had particular dreams. What does it all mean, and where does that fit into this piece of the puzzle? And it's a slow learning curve, but then every now and again there's a spurt. In the last 4 years, and particularly the last 18 months, there's been a spurt. It's been quieter on the fighting layer, I'll call it, because a lot of those type of things were dealt with 2 to 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and prior, but there was an escalation then of the takedown. And of course the Draco left a few idiots in here that have since been removed. And so it's now all up to us. And yes, we're dealing with some very psychotic, mainly human, not all. But we've got to learn to come together and overcome that. And shows like this will give you confidence to carry on with what you've been doing. Believe in yourself, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day, is what you believe happens. I mentioned about, I think it was summer of last year, that manifest abilities are much more prevalent now. Doesn't mean to say it's going to happen instant, because we're not in that sort of time phase. But people now have to be real careful where their energy and where their attention is going, because, like they always say, be careful what you wish for. The example was California. You had everyone screaming for rain. It happened, but it happened too much.
Yep.
Everyone wants to win the lottery. Well, most people do. I personally believe the lottery is just another taxation on the people, another way to strip part of your energy away. I'd sooner see 1 million people win a nominal amount that's going to improve their lives, not fantastically, but just enough, rather than one person winning a ridiculous amount that they don't know what they're doing, and you just end up spending it on stupid things. Again, external. It's not going to help your internal. With all these prosperity packages and the SARA and all this. Yes, we should be have debt eliminated, because we've been raped for multi-millions over our lifetime. And that would be a start. But then you get people saying, well, I'm not in debt, so I've lost out. But again, that's thinking of the self rather than the all. Because where the money's not needed to pay off your debt, it can go on to paying and putting people who are homeless into homes, or it can people who don't have the luxury of 1, 2 or 3 meals a day. There's far too many of them. So it goes to better things. So I think we'll kind of wrap the show up now, and I want to thank you for coming on, and thanks for having the courage to tell your story.
Oh, thank you, Thomas.
And go forward with it. You have quite a few pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of questions in today's show that I put forward. Listen to them again. And you mentioned that you're doing the meditation. So that's where you'll get more of your answers. That's where you then connect. You shut off the reptilian aspect of the brain, the mind, and go into the heart center. That's where you connect into your other pieces of your multi-dimensional aspect of you. That's where the big voice comes in, not the little voice, the big voice. So, anything you'd like to say before we play your final music piece?
No, it's just more encouraging. Well, I would like to encourage people to speak out of their experiences, even if it may not seem like it's an experience worthy of people's times or whatever you may think. It definitely is, and just have the courage to come forward, because if we do that, we're going to have the courage to make the change that we need to in order to better ourselves and the planet.
Exactly. Thanks very much, Karl. And anyone else wishing to come on and do this show, like Karl says, it doesn't have to be about ETs. It can be about anything. Just it's your story, you know. We've had I think this is the 8th show, and some of them have common themes, and some of them don't. It doesn't really matter. This is about giving you the opportunity to come and tell your story. And your story then becomes our story, not his story. That's what it's all about. And Karl will go away from this with greater confidence in himself to then, and who knows what he can achieve. No more, oh, little me, no one's going to be interested in my story. Well, this is the platform for telling your story, because you haven't been able to tell it to anybody for most of, if not all of your life. It's a safe environment. So, thanks for that, Karl. I'll be back next Thursday with the normal show, if we have normal shows. And enjoy the final piece, which is Pucifier and the Humbling River. And Karl's a humbling